Kronze, the first Demi-Spirit. Arma was a well-kept village enclave in the forest terrain near the volcano mountains. The age of depravity was over and all is new. Many people of Finks feared that Odin would return to burn them into eternity rock like before, their gossip of fear amongst the fishermen and hunters alike. The population grew from the misdeeds of the last era. Mud huts grew bigger. Most were too young to see the consequences of their elders' days. They heard many affairs of old from their parents. Just 100 years after he left, Odin became a taboo word to say. Some of the old called for sawboles to save their home spiritually if the word was spoken in their home. The man the god selected to be king was still a man. If the gods wanted to return, he couldn't stop them. The fire tribe had passions that turned into abilities, but nothing of scale as Odin. No one could achieve the ability of a god. The spirit of great power, mortal to god, was unheard of. Could man become Demi-Spirit? Chapter 1. Glare City. With the expansion of the population and poor conditions of the enlarged mud huts, the king Kronze had to think differently about his massive village, for too many slept under one roof. At this time the ways of a hunter turned into the ways of a warrior. The ways of a warrior turned into the discovery of abilities. The ability to produce and control fire, not of the level of Odin but remarkable. With that came the discovery of melting stone and sculpture into art. The first structure to experiment with this concept was the Tarach building, the court and home of the king himself, a stone-built structure that could withstand fire from the practicing warrior population. Kronze had the ideal that Nagas with imagination and warriors who wanted challenges should team and help sculpt the new idea of Finks he had in his mind. Kronze often helped his newfound engineers. They torn down mud huts and replaced them with rock structures using their amber abilities, the ability to produce extreme levels of flame. The Queen Fire would grow nervous at times watching this take place. "I do wish you would leave this to the selective," she would say. Trails were built for children. With helpful advice from fishermen, markets were built. They mined for stone in the mountains near the volcanoes they were all taught as a child to steer clear from. They did their best but came across something new in a mountain near the volcanoes. While ming for stone, some came across a lounge of lizards half the size of an average hut. At first the men chooses to fight the lizards. They had a change of heart when the lizards chose to flee and not make war. Being the warriors they were, the men thought cowardly of themselves to proceed this way. Eventually they learned the kind nature of the lizards. After winning the lizards' trust a week later, the men sent for the king. They wanted to know what to do with the lizards. When Kronze first saw the lizards he thought they were the crits he heard of from the mountains. "These aren't evil trolls," he said after looking at them long enough. "They rather his cloak than him for dinner," he noted. The animals were subservient of nature and saw from the way the warriors acted around Kronze that he was alpha. They grew fond of Kronze as he pondered their purpose. There were at least 50 of them in the cave. The warriors discovered the lizards only liked to leave the cave with a mortal partner but otherwise feared outside. Kronze decided to call them Yeletewa, or Yele for short. Yeletewa meant obedience to the first king in spirit language. They dined on fish, rodents and insects. They were fast with strong legs. This made them perfect for hauling large nets of rock. Their contribution sped up the process of Arma. The people of Arma didn't trust the Yelats at first. They thought the creatures were spies of Odin. The children were braver than the adults. They pet and played with the Yeles. At this time Kronze created Pribooks. Pribooks were step-ins for the king while he was away. They later became judges of Kronze court in Tare. They were well versed in the king's morals and wrote it into law. The renovation of Arma was such a success as it was proceeding that Kronze allowed himself to step back and let his Pribooks take over for a moment. They only came to him about new affairs of wisdom. Kronze and Faya conceived him an heir to his throne. He named his son Dayan, his love for his wife his joy. His son was a representation of that. Kronze decided to remarry in his courts by his Pribooks. He had his marriage wrote into law. The way he married was the only method of marriage in his lands. Soon the adults started to warm up to the Yeles as the lizard's childlike charm wore the adults down. Kronze was in great spirit. He developed new ideas for ships using his past as a boat repairman to help him in design. He rewarded his engineers by giving them spells to reinforce the stones and create training grounds for warriors. The rock was red and could withstand volcanic-like heat. This was used for warriors to test the limits of their amber powers safely away from the city. This was called Rose Stone. With the city mostly done, Kronze decided to call the city Glare City for its richness in style and art. The security of the people started to feel appropriate. Kronze deeply appreciated the elder generation and often would have them write to him things they learned in age. This helped Kronze deepen his philosophy on life, leadership, and arts of fighting. Kronze would surprise visit trials and speak to the youth. Kronze was fair in deeds, taxes. The skill and intelligence of his people allowed for an economy more advanced than in the days of mud huts. Kronze enjoyed the first religious institution of Yeshaya Temple. He believed he needed to be fair and allow for the making of Odine Temple. Some saw the making of the temple as a betrayal to the land, but Kronze assured them that a privilege of obeying the king's law was the allowance of diverse thought and meaning. Once there were more ships built from his design, they were able to move faster and catch more fish. This bloomed his economy. The influx of activity gave Kronze an idea to track its progress. Kronze came up with a concept called glare rocks. Chipped rocks with a red rose for the symbol of the king. This replaced all other currency in Arma. The rock chips were easily made from plentiful of remaining stone from construction. The rose marks made from red berries was the most expensive of the currency. It took a couple of years to establish, but eventually no market shop would take anything other than glare rock. This was made so as the king no longer collected any other currency as a deed. At the top of the rocks were tiny holes in them. These tiny holes were hard to reproduce. They were engineered by Kronze warrior engineers through the arts of fire, tiny and that at the edge of the rock. If one would try to copy this without the engineers, the entire rock would crack in pieces. Markets knew this and used this information to examine for counterfeits. A crime punishable by 3 years in the dungeons. When whistling into the holes of the rock, the sound of the wind determined the value of the rock. The further the wind traveled, the lesser the value of the rock. Kronze was able to measure how many rocks flow through his city like wine. Helping him understand his economy, Kronze made science and poetry in trails mandatory for 3 days of the week. All youth must attend trials for at least 3 days a week. The Nagas kept attendance, which they reported to Pribukes every week. Kronze wanted further generations of Arma to improve upon his legacy in making the Fire Tribe. The warrior culture of Arma did improved after the installation of the Rose Stone training grounds. The crowds around one of the training grounds gave a warrior an idea. He told it to Kronze, who loved it. With the help of his engineers and an idea he took from a poem Fire wrote for trails, they created a fighting area. The warriors wanted to showcase to the city what abilities they had been creating. Kronze wanted to use the area as a recruitment for generals in his guard. Kronze would at times dress up as one of the warriors and fight in the area as well. He wanted to see if he still remembered his warrior skills of past. He feared the warriors would take it easy on the king. He also feared the tongue of fire, as she knew what he was up to. Kronze wore a mask and wool cloth to hide his identity. He used an average sword instead of his own. Kronze said he would name the area after the greatest warrior in the area. Fight after fight, this turned out to be him undercover, for no warrior could beat him. He went under the name of Dalen. The area was called Dalen for this. The warrior was never seen after the naming of the building and made it into Arma legend. Soon after the naming of Dalen area, Kronze would have another child and name her Drya. Because Kronze's children were mothered by a demigod, they never got sick and aged slow. Kronze himself had the same mortality but didn't know it was from his training in his abilities. Both kids had their father mind and their mother's heart. There were 3 initial challenges. The first came from the rains of the spring. The hills and mountains to the west of Glare City sat in front of a great river. The river would be named Lodi Waitik River by the gods Loa. When rain chose to stay for days, the river would crease and flood the forest running down to Glare City. Farm irrigation was destroyed. The markets were to see the effect. The river ports to the land would also overlap with land, making it hard for boats and ships to tell land from water. Kronze brainstormed for a year what his next step was. Kronze drew drawings all night until he came up with a dam acting as a wall door to his lands. Kronze had a wall dam built with 5 door openings. It took the help of every labor, every fisherman, every warrior and engineer. Even help from Monies, students, from the trials, schools, every yele to build the wall. Some buildings, ships and weapons were melted down to provide the necessary metals and irons for the task. The doors were closed during rain season only. Rain season happened most in spring and autumn, though sometimes it happened in the fall. Made of the hardest steel and iron, they could sculpt the dam, sat at the river and tower the trees. Once entering West Forest from Glare City, the tip of the wall can be seen in the distant sky. The gate was called King's Door or Kronze Gate. Kronze Gate took 10 long struggling years to finish. Ironically, the river creasing and flooring work downstream made those building the wall think about giving up. When they saw Kronze himself pick up a tool to help, they stayed determined to finish the wall. Later generations wrongfully mistaken the tell of this day as Kronze. Building the wall himself, Kronze designed the wall to use steam tanks for the doors and lock pins and rotator gears. The rotator gears were giant rods with tubes connected to the front reservoir tanks. When the tanks heated up, the water expands into steam vapor, which applies force to the rods moving them. Under rods in the floor were pulleys that pulled the chains that ran inside the stone doors, opening them up. The lock pin method kept doors open or closed. Giant tanks inside the doors set at the bottom into the ground under the chains. Above the chains were giant cast iron pins. The pins sit in between the holes of the chains, keeping them from moving, which keeps the door from opening and closing. The pins sit in the reservoir tanks. When heated, the water causes the pins to rise and free the chain, allowing it to move. The first 2 years after the wall was completed, all those who labor away at it needed rest. By the 3rd year, irrigation bloomed beyond normal. The rain no longer drowned the forest or crops. The respect of the king reached new heights. The second challenge of Arma had to do with indentured servitude. An undermarket system of economics grew from farming, in-town markets and fishing. If an imbalance between labor and commerce happened, an issue would arrive. Working off debt was faster than going to the Tarai courts in town or physical conflict. Over the years, the practice spread to all areas of the economy. There was no king's law against it, as Kronze did not know of it. The people of Arma had an innate feeling of the practice being immoral in some way, but the free labor caused them to ignore their feelings. Over the years, this created an inferior and superior complex. When Kronze would visit in partial areas, he could see the attitude of if people changed, though he did not know what to contribute it to. Critics of labor became more aggressive than normal by the shop owners or farmers. One day Kronze saw a fisherman strike his worker. "In what law of my name are you free to do this?" he yelled. The fisherman apologized and the worker apologized for the fisherman, which confused Kronze. "You defend the sorcerer of your abuse." "Why, I need to ask," says Kronze. Kronze was in shock to hear of the labor man owing his labor to eat. Kronze told the man to go home and for the fisherman to never repeat the practice of slavery again. Kronze went back to Tarai and wrote up new laws out of anger. He had his guards recondition some buildings into courts. The guards were instructed to lay out words of the new law. Overnight, Kronze banned the practice of indentured servitude. Kronze was fierce and missed no words. "An absence of agency is a playground for evil and is not spared by my judgment," Kronze famously inscribes into his law. As of the crimes of killing or taking one against their will, indenture servitude was also punishable by death in Arma. Kronze also made law for no crown of labor, boss, to refuse a worker when in need, as to keep from having an underclass in his lands. The third and final challenge of Kronze as king, the black eggs. The last 3 years of Kronze's life became the most talked about of his kingdom. The Yelles started to act differently. Normally when pregnant, the lizards would still be mobile, but the Yelles now refused to go outside when pregnant. The mood of the Yelles would scare some of the children. Healers, doctors, of the town would well check on them to find out they were pregnant. Some thought of this was abnormal but not risky behavior. The king was called into a home in the back of a market to see a family's Yelles sleeping. They were worried because the egg, which normally is white, was black. The king was confused. He asked the men to take the egg to the back of the forest just in case, for safety. The guards traveled through town square with the egg before the worst happened. 2 guards in red gear and cloak walk the busy town square. Markets are running smoothly and faces light up with life as an average day continues. "What is the wait for?" asked one of the guards. Another follows behind him with a sphere egg covered in cloth. "You're not the keeper of Yelle eggs, you can sprint if you want with free hands," says the other. "Our Lord preach of urgency to reach the forest before too late. I'm just trying to keep his promise," he says as he walks in front. "Why is this a race to the death?" "It's just a Yelles," says the guard holding the black sphere egg in cloth. "It's a black egg," says the guard in front, steering through crowds of civilians. "This is to my knowledge why?" asked the guard trailing. The guard in front stops and turns to his partner. The guard shrinks his eyes and says, "Yelles lay white eggs." The second guard looks down to his chest at the egg in cloth. With nervous fingers he slightly pulls back the cloth to a shade of black before looking up at his partner. At that moment the first guard pulls his sword. "Drop the egg," says the first guard. "I'm no thief." "What has you mad?" asked the second guard. "Drop the egg now," stays the first, backing up slowly. This causes the second guard to quit and slowly look down at the black shade unveiled by the cloth. A part of red eyes breach the shadow of dark in the egg. The first guard, thinking about his command, wants correct and say, laying the egg down slowly. All he could utter was slow, before the second guard dropped the egg to the ground in panic to draw his own sword. The egg cracks and a powder keg of black smoke swirls the town square. People flustered with fear, there's no time to reach safety. The swirl of black smoke reaches for the sky, which indicates whatever is to come from this is larger than even the guards would dare imagine. Giant scale skin and sharp-edged wings expand from both sides out of the smoke before it can dissipate. A swirl of fire burns up what's left of the smoke. A dragon with red eyes and black fur at its wings screams. The fleeing of civilians catches the eyes of the beast from behind. The dragon stood twice the height of structures nearby. It turns its head and arms to look at what moves fast behind it. The dragon doesn't know its own limitations to movement in the square. Its winged arms tear through stone buildings like paper. The scream it lets out follows up with a lake of fire hurling towards the innocent. People are charred where they run or stranded. "Over here," yelled the first guard. The dragon turns its head but not its body. The anger in its eyes brings fear to the second guard. The second guard drops its sword and run. Before the first guard can react, the dragon jumps. The dragon's feet curl inward and its wings rip through buildings with ease to spread. A thrust of wingspan picks up things not cemented to the ground before dropping them from a flap. This repeats and the wind scratches at the guard's ear. The belly of the creature brushes over him as it heads his partner's way. The long neck of the dragon parts the crowd of fleeing civilians. It is now clear who's the next target of the dragon's madness. The first guard comes to his senses and follows after. It takes no time for the dragon to grasp at the second guard's attire, with one of its spear-like canines taking the man with it. The dragon breaks for the sky when the first guard brings amber to his sword. "He's with me, you hear?" yells the first guard. The second guard cries to the gods for help, but the dread in his voice knows of his doom. Into the clouds the dragon disappears. The moment is silent. Only the screams of the people in town fills the first guard's mind. At a moment's notice, the cloud spins red with amber and screams of unworldly terror. The second guard is dropped from the sky as a ball of black and blood. The sound of the guard passing through stone hits the first guard as emotionally as the sound hits his ears. The dragon tail spins out of the sky to pepper the town in fire. The engineering of the stone building keeps them from catching fire. At this moment Kronze appears from behind the shop. "Get as many as can fit to shelter in the buildings," says Kronze to the guard. "One of your own, there were two." "Now just me," says the guard. Kronze walks out the shop and reveal his blade rose gold with heat. "I'll try drawing the beast to the forest," he says. His guard says, "I'm coming with you." Kronze turns back after passing his guard. "You will serve Arma by moving its people inside," says Kronze. The guard knees, feeling he overstepped his king. "Yes, my king," he says before leaving. Overhead the dragon looped itself in the air, toying with all who ran. No one knew which section the dragon felt to burn next. The buildings could withstand the heat but not the people. Kronze waves his sword in the air with amber engulfing the blade, causing a mini fire tornado in the air. The flickering from the sky catches the eye of the dragon, who swings around like a car curving on an off-ramp. Kronze tells his general on their Anyele to reach the king's door at the end of the forest and open the dawn gate. The general nods before pulling the slash around the lizard's mouth for guide through the forest. The lizard takes off with urgency into the trees. Kronze turns to see the dragon in the distance heading his way. Once the dragon locks his neck, Kronze waves his sword of flame, making sure to keep the dragon's attention. The marker counter nearby catches his eye. Kronze jumps onto the counter and mounts the dragon when the time is right. The marker counter did not catch Kronze's eye for leverage. This was a rope counter for pulling wheelbarrows attached to Yele's. Kronze saw how the dragon slayed one of his men. Kronze knew the dragon's game plan and waited for the sky. Kronze stuffs rope in his pouch as he sits on the dragon's neck. The dragon heads for the sky, upset it can't see Kronze but knows he's there. The king stabs his blade into the wing of the fall creature. The creature lets out a cry so deep with fire it vibrates the wind around Kronze. Kronze uses his blade to steer the dragon away from the clouds. The dragon swims its wings and spins while flying straight, trying to make Kronze dizzy to fall. The Fire King is committed and stays hooked to the stabbed blade for grip. Kronze planned for the clouds but not yet. The wind hauls at him as the temperature changes. This causes Kronze to think about the sword and why it would be in his best interest to let go. The cold air stretches his skin but he grips harder. The king can see the tips of the trees over him. The dragon is away from town now. Kronze looks straight, hoping to see towering wall of iron his kingdom built. The dragon's next strategy is to let the wind do the work for him. The creature screams fire from its mouth in front of it. The wind in front carries the blaze to its back. It plans for its fire to catch to Kronze while he holds on to its neck. Kronze blocks by wrapping his cloak around him as he crouches around the stabbed blade. The sword made of a god's jewel can withstand the heat. The cloak not so much. Kronze decides to lose his cloak to the wind behind him. As they come up to the side of the wall, Kronze reaches from his pouch to tie the handle of his blade. After securing the grip, he pulls the blade out of the dragon's wing. The dragon, now free of the sword, flies towards the sky. At this very moment, Kronze swings the rope around his sword with all his might. The sword dives down, breaking with the wind. Kronze jumps to the other side of the dragon. His rope now in hand at one end and around the diving blade at the other. With his sword stabbing downward in the wind and Kronze off the dragon in the wind, the rope chokes at the beast at its throat. It jerks back with its wings swinging forward. Only smoke, not fire, leads its mouth. Kronze's plan is working. As both dragon and king fall towards the dam, the king screams to his guards. Close the gate, he screams with every bit of air in him. Groups off men with red armor and cloak grip flamed swords. They use their amber abilities to swarm the lock-pin chamber with steam from their swords to open the king's door. Now that the men can see their king hurling at them from the sky, their general tells them to stop. The blades turn from rose red back to cold gray steel. The rows of men step back steadily as the steam releases from the vents not to be burned. The sides of the wall starts to move. To the king's guards at the top of the wall, in contrast with the wall, the trees look like they're moving. The trees are not. The wall, greater in size than that of the trees, moves. Rock spits up at the bottom and the sound of cast iron shuffles loudly. The sound of clinking chains makes its way out of the pin chamber vents as the cast iron pins slowly descend. The king's door is closing. Kronze's men have no mind of what his plan is but trust him. Before the dragon can reach them, it plummets through the forest, tearing at the road and ripping trees at their root. A dust cloud waves in the air at the men atop the wall. They can barely see their king, who manages to find his way back at the neck of the creature. The dragon slides perfectly into the closing of the door as the door stops at its neck. The door now chokes the creature from moving. The stone of the town was paper to it. The iron of the wall was that of a god's hand around its neck. Kronze's plan is working. As both dragon and king fall towards the dam, the king screams to his guards. Close the gate, he screams with every bit of air in him. Groups off men with red armor and cloak grip flamed swords. They use their amber abilities to swarm the lock-pin chamber with steam from their swords to open the king's door. Now that the men can see their king hurling at them from the sky, their general tells them to stop. The blades turn from rose red back to cold gray steel. The rows of men step back steadily as the steam releases from the vents not to be burned. The sides of the wall starts to move. To the king's guards at the top of the wall, in contrast with the wall, the trees look like they're moving. The trees are not. The wall, greater in size than that of the trees, moves. Rock spits up at the bottom and the sound of cast iron shuffles loudly. The sound of clinking chains makes its way out of the pin chamber vents as the cast iron pins slowly descend. The king's door is closing. Kronze's men have no mind of what his plan is but trust him. Before the dragon can reach them, it plummets through the forest, tearing at the road and ripping trees at their root. A dust cloud waves in the air at the men atop the wall. They can barely see their king, who manages to find his way back at the neck of the creature. The dragon slides perfectly into the closing of the door as the door stops at its neck. The door now chokes the creature from moving. The stone of the town was paper to it. The iron of the wall was that of a god's hand around its neck. The king has the fire breather by the throat. The beast flails its wings, tearing at stone and trees near the wall. Branches hike over the wall, hitting some of the guards who block with their swords. Kronze walks out of the dust cloud with his rose-red blade down the dragon's neck. Once he is free of the door, he raises his blade, chanting an amber spell. Selwonanka, Paulul, he says. Kronze's sword emits a terrifying red in its glow. The red drips like ink. It's lava magic. Kronze repeats. Selwonanka, Paulul, he says louder, making his blade hum red. The language means my lordship be with this soul en route. The dragon blows the largest stack of fire from its mouth as the guards watch on, using their cloaks to shield as the flames reach across the river. Kronze swipes his blade, melting the scales and ripping through the creature's neck. Blood pours in the river as the dragon's head falls up and downstream. Kronze breathes heavy with blood and dirt on his face. He looks up to see his men bowing at the knee with their hats off. The king saved his people and his warriors took notice. 1 week later. Chapter 2. Rose Magic. The Fire Tribe king walks in the forest with his saw bowl while guiding his yele by rope. The king's robe silk black with gold seams. Freshly pressed and soft, his robe flaps at the wind. Kronze walks with his saw bowl, who wore an all-black toga with golden glitter vaguely visible. His hair barely touches his shoulders, displaying his age. Exhaustion and emotions wore on the sleeves of Kronze's men as they followed from behind. 70 people died by fault of the dragon. 70 tombs are left in the dirt of the forest behind Kronze. As they leave the funeral session, Kronze seeks counsel from the saw bowl about the dragon. His priest was the closest to hearing from the gods about why things are the way they are. A breeze and the wind pass as the king works up his feelings to talk. I wrestle back and forth that Sonara would want to create birds of hate, says Kronze. Her creations are tall and scroll. To script all would take months without sleep. I'm sure there are more than skies of fire somewhere there, says the saw bowl. One creation to end another. Somehow I can feel Odine's amusement, says Kronze. His saw bowl lingers from the corner of their eye. Worried Kronze was questioning his own throne. Odine would have stayed back. His twisted morals would have allowed for more to die. You are the guardian of Arma, the god's choice. Do not let dark days hide this truth from you, my king, says the priest. The sun pierced through the tress at Kronze's waist, revealing his sword handle. Wilders of the flame now hide from it, says Kronze. Dalen would not run, says the saw bowl, breaking at leaves in his hand. You talk of an Yuan who disappeared. Nothing to praise, says Kronze. And still he's spoken over feast and written into myth. What shall they say of his king, asked the saw bowl, tossing the leaves after boredom sat in. They will speak of a young guard told by his king to carry a dragon, says Kronze, petting his yele. The priest crosses his arms while speaking. You did not know of the danger before you. You cannot guilt this in honesty, he says. Wealth, the weather, these are things a king deals in, not evils beyond understanding, says Kronze, slightly upset. King Kronze of Arma doesn't ask conditions of his throne. King Kronze of Arma doesn't need to. That's what will be remembered. That you are the strongest king any tribe will ever know. The strongest king does not reign over a kingdom the unskilled could survive, says the saw bowl. Kronze stops and faces his priest. This causes his men behind to stop. One hawk of fire from a fall and they'll write no more of your king. I'll be charred like the rest, he says. Your buildings withstood the flames. Why not protect yourself the same, says the saw bowl. Rose stone armor. Are you mad, asked Kronze. No, my king, rose gold, fitting for a king I dare think, says the priest. Kronze pauses while swirling around in his head what his priest purposed to him. An armor and rise spell magic, protection of magic from fire into a suit of war. The king thought of this a brilliant idea. Kronze was almost shameful he didn't think of this himself, the answer to his dilemma thought of before his problem arose. Boaki, says Kronze, exclaiming his priest's name. There is a reason why I keep you close to me, says Kronze in a gentle smile. The next day King gathered his warlocks and engineers along with his blacksmith. The proposal he laid out seemed surreal but not impossible. Multiple members around the king's table thought of ideas, knowing they had little time. The city was on edge, knowing another dragon attack was on its way. Their lizard companions were not intentionally at fault. The city also relied on the lizards for hauling and transportation. The city knew it had to deal with the black eggs that's hatched. After several designs and molding of gold and magic, a suit was made by the end of the week. A helmet that of a bull's face with horns of gold and slicks for eyes. Gold shoulder pads and a gold-plated vest with a fire tear carved and painted in the middle. Thigh and knee pads with gold boots. At Kronze's request, the blacksmith made the material light enough for mobility. Several of the king's men ambers their hands and blades in fire as hot as they could at the suit. The suit results impressed all. Against Queen Faye's wishes, Kronze forced his men to strike flame swords at the suit with him inside. The King of Arma walked away without a scratch. Kronze added his own personal touch of style with the king's cloak. The silk red cloak bore the fire tear emblem in gold in the back. King Kronze also in quit called the suit Rose God. The king felt he was now prepared to take on the next dragon. Scrolls went out to all in Glare City to notify immediately the king and his guards of any black eggs produced by Yele's. Kronze also commissioned his blacksmiths and warlocks to make rose shields for his men. Because of the size of his army, this would be a Herculean of a task and take time to produce. A now arrogant Kronze saw himself at this time as the only protection until rose shields were finished. The day the second black egg came happened 2 weeks after the first. King Kronze and Queen Faya played with their children Drea and Dayan by the lake. At age 12, Prince Dayan took after his father in his mannerisms. Tales of his father slaying a dragon permeated in Dayan's mind. At age 8, Drea learned healing abilities from her mother. Down by a river bank, Faya teaches her daughter how to heal hummingbirds with pants as Dayan fishers with his father. The father-son duo stabs shallow water for catfish. At this moment a passerby boat of 4 men in red cloaks travels steadily down the river. Kronze is alerted to this by his personal guard. "King! King!" says the guard, sliding down the hill slowly to the shore. Kronze turns to the hill to see his guard pointing to the river. The king knelt to his son. "You have to leave now, am I right?" asked Dayan. The boy was worried he might not see his father from battle. "Keep your mother safe for me," says Kronze before hugging his son. The king waves his hand towards the boat approaching. Faya stands to see her husband walking towards the boat. Kronze looks back at Faya. The king balls his fist and taps his chest near his heart at his queen. As the boat approaches, 4 men stand to the side of a wooden chest with the king's suit inside. "My king, there's been a sighting of a dragon near Tarae Court," says the guard. Kronze walks on board. "Are there any injured or dead?" asked the king. The guard takes down his hair rag, letting his hair drape. "A pribook and a small child, sir. Our men were able to evacuate the building and others around, but not before their slaying," says the guard. Kronze downs his head on the boat, causing his daughter to cry, seeing her father from afar. The little girl could tell when her father was dealt saddening news. Faya grabs Drea as Kronze is handed his sword by his personal guard. "Rose God is ready, my king," says the guard in the back of the boat. Kronze unsleeves his sword momentarily before speaking. "Boaki, please be right about this," Kronze whispers. A Yele appears in front of the boat biting at a rope before swimming. The lizard pulls the boat back towards Glare City with the king on it. After 20 minutes, Kronze arrives on shore to smokestacks in Glare City. The ports were vacant with ships still full of fish, carts of produce scattered in the streets with broken wheels barely balancing them. Faint sounds of crying came from the windows as Kronze passed by alleys. Once more his people hid in fear. The guards snuck Kronze into the city by way of maze corridors. An idea strategy with one flaw. The plates of the rose gold clinked while walking, the thigh guards brushed up against the boots and the helmet against the shoulder pads. After several streets, Kronze knew there was no way to stay quiet in a peacefully dreaded city. The quiet of fear and his suit did not bode well. The king overanalyzes his breathing in his helmet for this reason. Thinking he made more errors than one, Kronze guards took refuge near a school building across from the courtyard of Tare. The guards hid by broken shelves in the halls near an open classroom. One guard used a bird flute to watch from the hall into the classroom at the window. Beyond the window the dragon was visible. It stood on the building eating at the flesh of a mortal. The king slowed on his footsteps towards the opening of the classroom. His guards unsure if from the sight of the dragon or the sound of his suit. The dragon had more bumps than scales for skin. Its clawed feet shifted the stone foundation of the tower it rested on. Scorched air breathed out its nose between bits of flesh. The dragon's wings wrapped around the building like a scroll. "It's taken the life of one of the guards since we sent for you," says a guard to the king. After looking from the sideways shelf, Kronze devises a plan. The king started to feel the suit over his skin empowering his attitude. The sight of one of his judges being consumed enraged the king. Kronze knew there were hundreds of men stationed in surrounding buildings of the courtyard waiting on his word to attack. "I plan to face it alone. Have your men distract the beast as I get closer to the front steps," says Kronze to his general. A mixture of sweat and fear comes over the face of his men as they think of the bold strategy by their king. There was no creativity to his plan from the point of view of his greatest of generals. "Are you certain this with Perville?" asks a guard. The king taps his sword before saying, "This is what we work for all that's days. Signal the rest as I appear in sight," he says. A silence deepens the hall before a guard nods and sends another towards the next room. Kronze could tell his top men found him to be more than confident. The king was self-set his arrogance but more aware of what it meant to retreat. More Armahians were waiting to be plattered for the beast. As the king steps down the halls he whispers, "Keep the creature in the courtyard." As the king steps out the shade of the school casted by the sun, the sounds of the dragon swings back and forth from underbelly. Somewhat like a horse, the dragon snouts with the mountains of a roar. Its eyes lowered and gaze spoke of its delight in flesh. The steps the grass lawn were blocked by chariots and stone. The sound of the king moving stone along with the clinking of his metal grabs the dragon's attention. The wind hurls violently as the dragon moves its head downward. The winged creature was visibly annoyed at the interruption of its meal. The dragon barely shows its teeth hoping to scare the man at bottom. From his helmet Kronze makes contact with the beast from above. The king reaches from his side to draw his sword. The dragon is easily angered by this. The king stops at the reaction. The dragon once standing now hovers in attack mode. The tossing of broken flesh to the ground tells Kronze the dragon is no longer looking to eat. The creature looks to kill. Its wings unwrapped from the tower and flap in the air moving loose rock from the roof. The dragon hovers on all fours watching Kronze at the top steps. It idles its voice loudly. The sound resembles a large boulder sliding roughly across the ground. The sun flares and reflects light of his armor. "Come get me, rat with wings," says Kronze to himself inside his mask. The armored man pulls his sword knowing this would excite the creature. As the tip of the blade shines from below, the dragon casts a tornado of fire down the tower towards him. The fire lays like rope across the halt grass lawn towards Kronze. After fire and smoke fades an armored man stand in bright gold. As his suit heats up the lining of red in his armor burns bright red with the orange of the gold glowing. The magic of the rose absorbed the heat while keeping the occupant safe. This embodies the king. Heat red blurs from his eyes while he emits a flare of flame from his sword. "Is that your best?" he tells while point his sword high. The dragon notices the armored man is still near. It steadies itself to jump from above. As it falls the dragon's wings glide from mid-wind as it circles down towards Kronze. Kronze runs up to meet the beast as its chest burns once more. The king jumps over a stone leaping in air. The dragon bursts flames turn him midair. The gust of wind from the fire punching Kronze out the sky, the king falls to the grass. The armor makes the impact twice-fold, the dragon spins around to charge once more at the king. His men panic and cheered for him to rise. A general used his blade to reflect sunlight to all the surrounding buildings. This signal caused 12 other buildings to mimic the blade reflection, tall buildings from all sides, north to south and east to west, threw their swords to send the rays of the sun the dragon's way. The shine blocked the vision of Kronze from below. Without a clear view the dragon wing by as not to touch him. It passes as it sends for the clouds going upward in motion. The dragon swirls from out the clouds drawing down like a sphere back towards the king. Hundreds of guards stand on rooftops pointing their blades producing fire clusters like rain at the beast. Once fire escaped from their blades, the men ran and hide as the dragon blankets the roofs in its own amber. It snowed tears of fire onto the city. The king crawls from out the rubble, tossing stones off his head. The lawn and the streets looked like hell, anything not of rose stone or gold burned. The king started to worry. His attitude caused this more than the dragon. Failure started to sink in after seeing the innocent fleeing from buildings with fire blocking doorways. The creature swam through the fire rain in the air with its wings spread. At an instant something from inside him wakes. Lying dormant, a passion unlike anything he ever felt. Kronze locks his eyes on the beast. He no longer saw the ruin of his city. His body felt lighter as gravity around him strengthened in pull. The updraft of smoke, once rapid, stood still. A colorful vision grayed in Kronze, his pupils red with flame. The armored man stared down the winged rat. A serenity of peace overwhelmed him as he dove deep in his hate for the dragon. The king started not to care for life. Only his pride spoke to him. A dragon caused him to burn his own city. Its trip sound made him think the dragon was mocking him. A mother is without a child, and Kronze is without a judge or a guard. If he allowed it, Kronze would be without a city. He couldn't help his men from up top but read one's lips. They were trying to ask what next of him. The king stands with a giant stone sliding off him. Its impact to the ground was his only way of knowing it was there. He felt his hand dripping. He wondered if he was bleeding. When Kronze looked to his hand, it wasn't. But drip it did. The king's blade was engulfed in red liquid. It ran over itself in laps, holding most the liquid in place. The entire blade was one red liquid in sword form. Kronze only saw this liquid once before. The lava of the mountains were full of this. His hand didn't burn. As he turns the blade, taking in what was happened, Kronze noticed that he could feel his emotions through his sword. The king now knew he was the fuel, being his sword's transformation. The king removes his helmet with his other hand. The helmet blocked his side view. The king, though elated, doesn't smile. He target locks. The dragon drops for its last dive towards him. Kronze grips his blade tight and walks calmly towards the dragon. The look in its eyes and open of its mouth says it changed its mind. The dragon will trade a judge for a king in feast. It lowers itself, flapping at the wings, picking up and dropping stones along the way. The king stops walking and points his blade at the dragon. Men at the top scream for the king to run. He doesn't. A blank stare with tears in his eyes, he looks inside the dragon's mouth. There were no tears of fear but of joy. Kronze has unlocked a god ability and he knew it. The dragon snaps at the mouth once it takes him in. It moves without interruption as it passes. The king's sword rips through its back and tail like butter. Clean cuts suggest exit wounds burn over as they are made, leaving for no blood spill. The dragon is cut in half as if a butcher served a cow. The bottom half drops instantly, with the top falling off to the side into markets, carts and chariots. Fragments of guts laid at his armor. But his blade stayed directed straight. It still dripped in lava. All of the guards at the roofs couldn't believe what they saw. The generals outtook their king for a god. They never seen a man pull off what Kronze just did. After the reverb of noise from the dragon's collision with the ground, the dust cleared. Tears of joy filled his men's eyes. His generals were the first to kneel, some slow to follow, eventually followed. Hundreds of men kneel while praising Kronze. "Hail, King of Arma!" they cried repeatedly. As Kronze lowered his sword, he noticed the lava liquid was no more. The flames had burned out and turned to black smoke. The town was ruined but no longer burning. Smoke filled the air. But the battle was won. The king once more protected his city. In the king's quarters in the highest room in Tare, Kronze works on a new law with a Prebuk and Sawbowl, priest. Kronze keeps Sawbowls present when writing laws, as he feels their counsel would help him keep in good graces of the gods. Prebuks are made to wear white robes with red lining of the king's crown in the middle. Only those in Kronze's army considered to be the loyalist are awarded such a robe. The laws of Arma are enforced by Prebuks. Anything the king saws is law they must know as the imprint of their soul. On this particular day Kronze decided to seek counsel from Sabols of Odin's temple instead of Yeshia's. Most of Arma holds a bias towards Yeshia. Yet Kronze wanted to prove his word to the Dynadirs. He wanted to include them into his governance out of respect. Kronze sits at his royal table in a rose-red flower suit made specifically for the king as he speaks his thoughts and emotions. The Prebukipnor writes all down on a scroll while sitting in a guest chair. The Dynadir Laocoon stands in a grey robe with black lining listening on. Why so brash in tongue? Asked Laocoon to Kronze. It needs to be known that mistreatment will not be tolerated in the slightest. That the Yales are as much as Armenites as are we. Says a passionate Kronze. Laocoon walks up to examine the scroll while saying, I only infer that your people see you as a just protector, not an unstable one. Says Laocoon. Ipnor stops writing. Thinking Laocoon upset the king. Kronze doesn't recoil. He only puts his fingers underneath his chin in deep thought. You would say I've overextended my punishment, wouldn't you? Asked Kronze to Laocoon. Half a century for poor taste in words, my king? Asked Laocoon in a suggestive voice. Words are how one starts to separate themselves from the fate of others. Replies Kronze. The Dynadir walks up to the table and pleads. The people have suffered enough in dragons. They need a king who understands. Says Laocoon. The king folds his arms, entangling his fingers at his lips. And what form of retribution do you propose? Asked Kronze. A night's sleep to sweat out the mood, my lord. Says Laocoon. Kronze turns and says. 7 days at Nor. Quote it. The Prebuk swings his feather back and forth of a full minute as Laocoon rests his hand on his forehead in disapproval. Punishment in verbal defacement of the king's creatures equals 1 Ari immediately. Says Ipnor. It's not kind to write a broken heart into law, my lord. Says Laocoon. If I'm not mistaken. The one you choose to rule over your mind. He acknowledged me as king. He knows what kind of man I am. What kingdom I rule. Says a slightly upset Kronze. Even now. You anger in your words. The dragons have obsessed you in your own hate. All I suggest is a calming before a decision. Says Laocoon. Kronze stands up out his seat. 2. How many dragons have you slayed, Dynadir? I count 2 by my blade. Says Kronze, invading Laocoon's space. The Sabol sighs as he realizes his king is drunk on passion. The Armenites aren't uncaused or irrationally in their feelings. If they felt their tribe was open in ears, they would calm. Maybe the king would as well. Says Laocoon before leaving the quarters. Shall I continue? Ask a now nervous Ipnor. Check for errors and I shall blood it into law. Says Kronze before grabbing an apple. The Dynadir walks up to the table and pleads. The people have suffered enough in dragons. They need a king who understands. Says Laocoon. The king folds his arms, entangling his fingers at his lips. And what form of retribution do you propose? Asked Kronze. A night's sleep to sweat out the mood, my lord. Says Laocoon. Kronze turns and says. 7 days at Nor. Quote it. The Prebuk swings his feather back and forth of a full minute as Laocoon rests his hand on his forehead in disapproval. Punishment in verbal defacement of the king's creatures equals 1 Ari immediately. Says Ipnor. It's not kind to write a broken heart into law, my lord. Says Laocoon. If I'm not mistaken. The one you choose to rule over your mind. He acknowledged me as king. He knows what kind of man I am. What kingdom I rule. Says a slightly upset Kronze. Even now. You anger in your words. The dragons have obsessed you in your own hate. All I suggest is a calming before a decision. Says Laocoon. Kronze stands up out his seat. 2. How many dragons have you slayed, Dynadir? I count 2 by my blade. Says Kronze, invading Laocoon's space. The Sawbowl sighs as he realizes his king is drunk on passion. The Ammonites aren't uncaused or irrationally in their feelings. If they felt their tribe was open in ears, they would calm. Maybe the king would as well, says Laocoon before leaving the quarters. Shall I continue? Ask a now nervous Ignore. Check for errors and I shall blood it into law, says Kronze before grabbing an apple. Chapter 3. High Seas. 6 hours later as night falls. Miles away near the ocean, a river access point with lock gates opens. The gates let fishermen of Arma in and out the country. The king wanted to personally see for himself evidence of a destroyed ship unlike theirs. The name Riminer was painted on the sail of the ship in blood. The king knew this had nothing to do with dragons but wanted to see for himself the ship, as of his very own laws. Kronze's ship, the Blaze, was accompanied by 2 military ships, the Fog, side by side his. In honor of the design of his dam wall, Kronze had his river gate built the same, while larger than his wall. The wall gave great memory for building such a feature. After building of his dam wall, the building of his ship wall, while larger, was finished faster and arguably better. Built from the mountain terrain extending out like arms to its opening. The gates sat in the river letting out to the ocean. Bronze gold lanterns lit half up each mountain through the canoe leading towards the gates. This allowed sight in the dark near the shipping dock. The lanterns chased down the wall towards the gate. The king's ship, also known as the Blaze, was retrofitted with the latest in Arma's technology. The Rose Cannon. Bronze gold cannons with dragon mouths at each end. Several were bolted throughout the ship. More were planned to be built throughout the city. The largest Rose Cannon was made out of the starboard of the Blaze ship. Bronze gold thick exterior was made to withstand attacks from a dragon. It also made the ship perfect for ramming other ships. In front and back of the Blaze were the Fog ships, equal in size though not in material. Fog ships were painted gray with faded green lining. The ships often carried army men with weapons, or if not for war were made to haul fish or materials for construction. Its color and name were no mere accident. The colors allowed the ships to blend in with the fog, making them invisible. The ships also blend into the horizon of clouds from afar in the ocean. These were made to be stealth ships. The royal ships pass smaller fisher boats as it exit Arma for the ocean. Waves lapped in the dark like a beast trying to shake its shackle loose. The Blaze and the Fogs raced towards the wreckage of the ship. They wanted to reach it before the nearby storm approached. The ship would surely sink if the storm hit to it first. The wrecked ship wasn't far from the lands of Arma in the ocean. After 20 minutes of rough seas, the Blaze makes out the wrecked ship. It laid near a sandbar. Its mast was cracked and barely standing. Its hull was intact but with its sail fragmented. The ship couldn't leave on its own. Definitely not in these winds. After anchored, Kronze's men entered the wrecked ship first to check for survivors or threats. The second Fog ship stood watch in case a threat loomed in the waters. After an intense passing of 30 minutes, one of Kronze's guards lights his blade to signal all is well and safe. Once the message is received, Kronze takes a smaller boat towards the wrecked ship along with 3 men. The wrecked ship budges slightly at the waves. A drop next ladder is present for the king to board the ship. Once aboard, Kronze asks for a report. The belongings in the bottom quarters suggest 8 occupants. No sign of either. Forced departure seems unlikely, my lord, says a guard in a red cloak. The sound of sail above flapping in the wind, along with the cold draft from the storm in the distances, gave the night its lore and grim thoughts of what took place on the ship. Do we know the original of the ship? Asked Kronze. Not by tribe though by name, says the guard pointing towards the second of sail in front of the ship. Though the wind made it hard to capture a full glimpse, Kronze knew something was written on the sail of the ship. The king walks towards the front of the ship, every few seconds holding on to its railing or walls while waves rush the side. The wind slows momentarily for the king to see. stained in blood at the front of the ship. The name Riminer was written. No sub or context to it, just a cry of recognition in name. There were ink feathers in full near a stairwell, the king noted as he walked by. The choice of blood must have been a statement of dire need. Riminer. At least we know the former Massey's name, says Kronze. The guard behind points behind him while saying, the name is written on the other side of the ship as well. Kronze walks by in his leather cloak and gloves, pulling at his chin while in thought. It was written in display towards land. Perhaps we were made to see it. There's nothing for miles at the other side of the ship, say the king walking around. He glances at the half-ate dish towards the side of the deck near crates. Untangled rope and rain boots laid about. The ship told of a scene where dramatic events weren't planned. Perhaps a sudden threat of some kind arose. Lotfi, says Kronze to his guard. The red cloak guard walks up to the king's side. Yes, my lord. Hitch your ship to the Riminer as it wishes to be called. We will take it with us to be further examined. Make it quick. The storm arrives in 30 minutes, says Kronze. Will do, my lord, says the guard, nodding his head. The king walks towards the net ladder as his guard signals the rest of the men in back to exit the ship. As the king steps down the ladder, ropes wrapped in black spheres shoot from the fog towards the wrecked ship. Within minutes the fog wedged the wrecked ship off the sandbar. The ship was effortlessly dragged away from the sand. Once free, the wrecked ship pulls closer towards the fog slowly by thick ropes half the width of a tree trunk. A drop cage with barrels of water in it is placed between both boats from the fog. The rope is tied off on the ship. Both rope and barrel between ships ensure a steady grip for towing the wrecked ship out of the sea. Kronze is helped back to the blaze along with his men. The wind slightly picks up as all four ships exit the sea back towards Arma. Abrasive clouds and thunder from afar draws closer. As the ships approach the ship gate opening by sounds of moving chains, Kronze sat in thought. Once more the thought of men lost weighs on him. Those already lost by the dragons and those who might soon be. Kronze thinks of his duty as a king and the lives lost on his watch. The king glances at all at work on his ship. The responsibility of life he took for granted. Before he thought of his throne as earned by ways of the gods, now the king thought it as punishment of his people. As much lives was lost under his name that of the days of Odin. Was it inevitable for the people of Arma to suffer? The king wondered if he was any better than scorned gods. The faces of his men aboard stain in him their lives for him to upkeep. At a moment's notice all around him would die for him. Yet he felt he was tasked with keeping them alive. Kronze also couldn't rule out the occupants of the wrecked ship being taken by dragons. That he too was responsible with keeping the evils of his land to only his land. There were no burn marks of the ship. Perhaps they dived overboard to escape the dragon before it had chanced to. By now, while in deep thought, the king doesn't see the gates closing in front of him. He sat at the back of his ship with only a fog ship and closing gate in his view. In deep thought he didn't notice. As the king rests his elbow on the railing of the blaze, he snaps out of deep thought. Kronze noticed a pair of lanterns sitting lower than usual. All lanterns that guide ships in the river at night sat midway up the cliffs on both sides. For some reason these lanterns sat lower. Another observation showed that the lanterns sat closer to each other. The lanterns were spaced out to provide as much coverage of light without thinking out interfering with each other. Lastly, the fire from the lanterns sat slanted while the others on the wall didn't. After collecting in evidence, the king rose from the railing. His heart froze from what he knew this to be. The pair of fire he saw was not that of lanterns, this. No. 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 No lantern wills this. Only eyes willed it. Too big to be human. But with great amber. The king now knew he was staring into the canoe. A tunnel space for water to let out once it rushed the gate. In the dark the area is not lit. It didn't need to. Ships knew not to steer there. The pitch black fooled Kronze. He remembered there were to be no lanterns this way. The king thinks to himself. A dragon lurks in shadow with lantern eyes. The king looks to his men in the fog ship behind him. He yells with all the fear he hid inside him. Dragon! He screams towards his men. The Massey of the ship looks his way in confusion as if he couldn't hear him. Kronze screams it again only for the sound of bass and vibration from the shadows to speak over him. A growl roars. A growl to make the bravest of men recoil. The hearts of all muted out sounds of wind and water to the sounds of terror. Knowing what would happen next, Kronze tried to yell to his men to dive overboard, but the lantern eyes lifted now higher than the others. A dragon the size of the last two slayed at Kronze's hands into one. This dragon was doubled the size in black scales. There were horns shared only in look of a bull on each side its head. A longer tongue with a split in the middle like a snake's. The dragon steps on foot out of the dark tunnel and rams the fog with its head. The spear ends of its horns tears into the fog as men screamed in terror. The sudden flux of waves from the shift in water rushes up against the blaze. The king's ship shifted front and down with its back towards the air as it takes in this cataclysmic bombardment of waves underneath. The middle of the fog behind them tore with wood crinkling as it stretched apart. Those who could dived overboard. Those who couldn't died from the impact or sharp threads of the broken wood. The dragon lifts its head, the fog was ripped in two pieces. That back of the ship fell behind the beast in water. The front stubbornly held on to the creature's temple before being shaken off. The fall of the fog's front created another ripple of waves towards the blaze. Kronze looked in fear. The dragon, still standing in one place, turns its head directly at Kronze. The creature made it known who would be next. The men on the blaze rushed towards the back to see what was left of their fellow men. Some floated lifeless in the water while others drowned or swam desperately for safety. Black smoke chimneys from the nostrils of the creature as it mocked Kronze in an evil stare. A split of a second the king stares down the dragon before tell to his men. We will keep him here and away from Arma. Yells Kronze at his generals. What of the wrecked ship? Ask one of his men. The king knows he hasn't but of a second to decide. The wreckage was valuable to him, yet he felt he needed as many men as possible. The king decided to keep the ship. Keep towing. Tell your men not to come for us, says Kronze. The general turns to rush and relay the message. The king turns to his second general. My armor, he says. Out of the barracks 4 men walk with a wooden crate latched in gold. As they sit the crate near his feet, the king reveals his key from behind his shirt. Kronze looks back at the dragon before it walks. The ground tremors as the king opens the chest to his rose stone suit. Preoccupy him, says Kronze as he unrobes to dress in his armor. Men rush to the rose cannons of the blaze. 4 cannons in the back. The men use their amber abilities to read the stems on the cannons. Another tremor, stronger in vibration, says the dragon is closer. The fire is blown out as the dragon flaps its wings to take flight. The wing just of the creature burrows men in wind. All hold their arms to their face to keep the wind from sucking the air out their lungs. Kronze turns with his shield halfway on. He plans to warm us. Shields, the king says. At that moment all men ready their rose stone shields of red and gold. The outer thicker gold plates on the exterior of the ship glowed, sensing the next event. From the dragon's mouth a flame lush in red and thick in yellow shoots like a meteor from the sky at the blaze ship. The gold of the king's suit, of the men's shields and that of the ship itself protects all from flames. The air filled with oil of smoke, but the ship didn't burn. As the men felt their person and belongings to see it still intact. Kronze reminded them to stay and fight. The cannons, he yells. The king's men relit their cannons to arm at the dragon. At this point his first general returns to let him know the first fog ship leaves with urgency but promises to return. General Sahin. Promises to return soon, my lord, says the general. As the men fire cherry flames into the sky, Kronze instructs his general. Dock this boat. "This dragon will not leave this area," says the king. More men ready their cannons as the king finishes his suit. The dragon flies higher after noticing the cherry flames dropping. The flaw in the making of the cannons were in the distance a flame could travel upwards. After a certain range the fireball curves and drops down. The dragon flew higher to escape the velocity. The blaze ship docks and hides as much as it could in a roll of ships. After men flee the ship, Kronze tells his generals to keep men on the cannons. His plan was to use the cannons once the creature gets closer again. Kronze also wanted the dragon to feel cornered from 2 attacks. The large creature flaps its wings in the air over the open river watching. It matriculates its emotions as it looks on. The dragon watches the men take cover behind boats, barrels and stone. The creature dives down, heating the cool wind around it. As the men get in position, Kronze calms his men. "Steady. Wait for my signal," he says. 30 men with facial expressions of stress waited. They've never dealt with such events as their king has. Some cried silently as others looked war-ready. The king looks to heat his blade as he did with the last dragon. A dread fills him once he learns he cannot. Kronze didn't understand. The lava liquid he made before was not willing to appear. Only red and fire his blade glow. Once the dragon was close enough, the king shouts, "Now! Amber!" He yells. All men shield themselves while pointing their swords. A blaze of fire shouts from sword towards the dragon. 30 streams of fire along with Kronze's daggers in the air at the beast. The cherries from the cannons at the other end of the dock fire as well. The dragon misses most of the flame by swerving to its left, but his shoulder swiped by cannon bombs of fire. The dragon loses control of its flight and make for a troublesome landing. As it drops in the water, a small typhoon screams to the sky and drops on the dock, knocking boats into each other. Several cannons are knocked loose of the blaze and swallowed by the river. The group goes from 30 to 12 men as the waves plunge them into the water. Items bolted made for refugee as the men held on. Once the waves calmed, some rejoiced as others saddened from lost comrades. After the hiss of water silent, the scenery of men wipe water from face and boat emerged. "Did we kill it?" asked one of the guards still with cannon on board the blaze ship. Kronze was smart enough, experienced enough to know they didn't. He didn't speak. Just listened as his men speculate. As he rise to his feet, men build their confidence. "I think we did," says one of the men. "Where's Dafor? Win. Where are they?" ask another in fear. After controlling his breathing, Kronze says, "In the river along with the dragon. Their deaths are for Arma." The men look with disbelief. Kronze himself couldn't make sense the words from his mouth. He cared deeply for his men and knew he would suffer more than any would know. The king knew that the worst wasn't over. Kronze knew how to kill a dragon. Fire cannons were not capable. "Ready yourselves," he says as he sharpened his blade. "What for?" "It's dead." "You saw," says one of his men. "This one is bolder in size. He's not going away that easy," says Kronze. One of his men express in frustration a throw of his sword to the ground. "Say this is false," he says. This catches Kronze's attention. "On Mo. Women and children will sleep softly tonight with your bravery. So show it," yells the king. "Yes, my lord," says the man. "Yaku. Ready your cannons," yells Kronze. "We have only one left," the guard yells back. Kronze stops in shock. Before he could speak, the floor beneath buckles and vibrates. The men on hold desperately to still items as the river is still in clothing. The shaking causes ships to part from the dock as rope snaps. The sound of bolts loosing and wood cracking rings ears. The vibrations makes for headaches as the dock rocks violently up and down. Kronze pleads with his men. "Off the dock. Off the dock," he says, grabbing a few of his men to leave. Several men limp to move away as the wooden floor radiates in vibration. The suction of sound caves in and outward in a nanosecond, as a sonic boom ignites with the breaking of wood and structure. Stone and man are whisked in the air as the dragon rams from beneath. The dragon dives out of the floor, with its bull horns delivering a devastating blitzes of energy to the dock and Kronze men. Sections of the floor hoist in the air, to drop seconds later on other parts of the dock and river. Several men drown while others are trapped underneath fragments of the dock. The dragon roars in age of vengeance as the 12 men turns into 5. Kronze angers from the depletion of his men in front of him. From across the dock he sees a guard crawling towards another unconscious guard. The guard desperately hugs the other, trying to wake him. The dragon screams once more as it flies in the circle, now freed of the river. Kronze knew this was the dragon's way of asking him to fight it. A cherry from the last active cannon races in the air at the dragon. Kronze sees this. Rain from the storm in the distance comes down. The storm they flees finally caught up with them. The thunder of the night sky drapes the dragon in more than one position. It flies from side to another of the sky, now only visible by thunder. Rain runs down the king's face as he angers. The dragon roars once more. A tease to challenge its roar suggests. A guard looks at the king walking. His eyes waters not from rain or water. He cries to his king. "My lord," he says. The king walks in his rose gold stone armor. There were no fires near him, yet his armor lit in gold, bright reddish yellow. The king ignores his guard, who reaches for him as he passes. After several minutes, Kronze reaches the cliffs to the wall gates. The dragon saw no one moving on the dock, yet it knew Kronze was still alive. The dragon flew in circles in the rain, waiting. The king removed his helmet as he climbed the hill. It looked as if he might have thought the weight of the suit to restrict him from doing so. A tossing of a shoulder plate as he got higher in climb. Thigh and boot was next. The dragon roars its impatience. The king boards the top of the gate after 30 minutes. He now stands at the ledge of his gate. It stretches from one cliff to the next like a bridge. Rain runs down it, making it hard to see across. The stubborn king walks it, discarding his vest plate in the process. Now in only his royal sleeve garment and sword. Kronze welcomes the rain. The king stares at the dragon, the winged creature only visible by lighting. Kronze points his blade, now dripping of lava as his glows red. "I promise to choke dead what sends you, beast," says the king. Air simmers and crackle around the dragon's eyes as it stares at Kronze. The beast roars even louder as it stops flying and spins itself one place. The dragon's tail extends, creating a wind thrust like its wing. Fire comes from its mouth. A gust of power wind darts towards Kronze, followed by flames from the dragon's belly. Kronze crouches a bit to break with the wind pounding down on him. The flush of fire runs behind the wind. It rushes through Kronze like a waterfall. His skin glows bright orange with his skeleton visible in white. The king takes in the fire at his skin. A first for mortals. One of Kronze's men at the bottom by the dock sees this. The guard starts think his king of a god. After fire rushes him, the gate pearls in bright orange. The stone he stone on burned to the flame, though he did not. Once more, the terror in his people from the dragon woke something in him. Something he couldn't command. His hatred towards the winged one made him target lock in his emotions. Kronze didn't even acknowledge that he could withstand dragon breath. The protector of Arma stood in ripped threads and undergarments. Chest, arms and leg now visible as most of his clothing burned off. He swipes the ledge with his sword, causing sparks to jump from the gate. The king mocks the dragon back. "Not so bold, once equaled," yells Kronze to the dragon. The beast head flips back in hysteria as it angers from the king's words. The dragon was at peak flame in soul. Kronze watches as the creature loops downward in flight towards him like a funnel cloud. Kronze's blade still dripping in lava as he looks on. The beast land both feet in the ledge at the top of the gate. Chains inward shake loudly. Through hope or miracle the gate takes the weight and impact of the dragon. Its wings flap viscously as it howls. The funk of death greases the air Kronze way. The creature's tail snaps at the air like a whip. Kronze twirls his sword as he ready. I've been challenged by gods more cruel in looks than you. I dare you. Impress me. Yells Kronze with his blade in front of his face. The dragon vibrates the back of its lip towards its jaw in anger. It leaps to stand on its back legs, as if to hawk up spit while its belly brights in red. The dragon conjures up flame and drags down once more. The creature's mouth opens as flame expel at the king. A red of wine colors. Kronze's eyes and skin as the flame hurls his way. Kronze raises his flame and amber's lava fire back the dragon. The meeting of two separate flames clash. An impact wave of sound and air pushes as both flames fire for passage. Neither to nudge. The dragon screams its flame in exhaustion as Kronze's hand tires. Both at their peak strength, yet neither backs down. The flame and strength pushes both back. The dragon digs its claws into the gate as Kronze crotch with his own strength breaking in the floor of the ledge. The furnace of fire locks the king back in deep thought. Kronze wondered if he was a god. No mortal before him accomplished what he has. His blade once again that of a volcano. He didn't know and never asked. He felt to question its origin was to lose it. More so the king asked himself how long would he kill dragons before they kill him. The king catches the dragon's eyes. The heat of his blade pure in flame. Pure in lava starts to bond in emotion with the rhythm of another. In thought Kronze feels two heartbeats. A slower, more heavy rhythm starts to sync up with his. Through the passion of the fight. As both dragon and man test their emotional strength in fire. Their hearts merge. The dragon could now share its thoughts. Its dreams. Its soul with the king. A cool breeze rushes Kronze's body before replaced with an inferno of emotion. Both creature and man shows the flame. Kronze pulls back his sword as the dragon closes its mouth. An airy stare happens, the dragon tilts its head in mystery. Now curious the king slows his walk through the smoking hot ledge. Kronze with a tear in his eye reaches his hand out towards the creature. The king can hear the souls of all his people who fail. Unbeknownst to Kronze. The sea momentarily glows green in the distance. A soft singing from the dead swims in the wind as he walks closer to the creature. Angelic in hate. Soft and grotesque. The sounds of the dead warn him to touch. Kronze rubs his hand gently down the dragon's scales. The creature breathes loud but soft as its eyes close. Kronze hugs the dragon as he now feels connected to its heart. The king looks at the glow of green in the distant ocean. The singing cracks a smile from the protector of Arma temporarily. Kronze steps back and looks as much as he can in the creature's eyes. As it lowers its head, the king pushes its nose away to get a better view of its eyes. At this moment, all makes sense to him. Kronze feels one with the dragon. He felt one with the Yele's. A now peaceful king in hate strikes. Kronze reds his eyes and frowns. This catches the beast off guard, who flinches. The dragon recoils as it stares. Kronze stares with all his hate and all his passion. He still haven't forgotten what the wings once did to his tribe. The dragon's heartbeat fades from his as it looks up. The dragon swings its head back and forth, pushing the king back. The dragon was now confused. The thoughts of Kronze enters its head.
You look to drink in the ocean. Your thirst will never empty.
These words are channeled from Kronze towards the dragon's mind. The creature fights at first and roars loud as the guards watch on. A fatigue calming settle in the creature as it weakens in power. The dragon, now drowsy in movement, looks towards the ocean.
Yes. Drink.
Kronze thinks as he communicates telepathically. The dragon slowly stretches its wind and dives head first towards the ocean. The sound of its wings flapping fades in the wind and rain before it dives in the ocean. Before the dragon could fully submerge, it tries to roar. Its sound is mist with drowning as it pleads for help. Kronze looks with anger before his eyes return to normal from glow. A now partially naked Kronze parts with the gate which still held on. Remnants of a broken ship floating up against the ship gate. Parts of cannons floated across the river along with pieces of the dock floor. Men floated in the water while others lay dead on what was left of the dock. A guard leans on his shield as he stands. After the king makes it from the cliff back to the dock. The man speaks. My lord. I do not believe the gods left. They walk in you. My king. My salvation. Says the guard as he kneels. Tukwin. You kneel to the scattering of your kin. The ruins of your armada. This is not salvation. Says the king. My king stood tall inside flames. My king. My kin. Your men. We were the cloak of Arma knowing the cost. Says the guard in response. Before Kronze could speak, the first fog ship is spotted coming down the river towards the dock. A guard still inside the blaze catches the king's attention. Kronze. My lord, he yells. The king looks up to see the ship once with the wrecked ship free to travel. Tukwin walks up to him. You saved them with your wisdom. He says. Kronze turns to speak. Once a tow of ships. Now a collector of the dead. Says Kronze before walking away. Chapter 4. Two Spirits. The Yeshia temple sat near the forest at the inn of Glare City. The temple was all to its own. The castle-like steeple separates itself from others with the tip of a rose carved into its stone. The members bear the same image into their cloth. The flagship tower of Yeshia was the tallest man-made structure in Glare City. Visible in all corners of the city. Built from the days of Paraphir as a defiant engineering and architecture challenge. A few of Kronze's men slayed by the dragon were devout members of Yeshia's temple. At the request of the individual temples. All its members are to be buried in its plot lands near its building. Kronze chose the top step of this temple to blood and to law his new passions. He wanted those of Armagh who choose not to flee to hear in speech this new law. Kronze wears the red robe of the Shies to show solidarity with its sawboles. His braids tied in a red feather, over 1,000 people showed up for his speech. The attendance was optional. The king knew his people were terrified of the city now. To his surprise, the thousands stood confident. Kronze was not aware of the rumors spread from his guards. Those that witnessed the king slay the dragon spoke lore of the events across the land of Arma. Even the goat herdlers in the mountains knew of his triumphs. The people still feared the black eggs in heart. The stories of the king as a god in secret gave them hope. A last-minute request by the king was made possible to show 4 coffins. The king wanted all who stood in the streets to see the mortality of his men. Kronze never forgot those slain under his watch. Red coffins of wood. Laid spread across the porch of the temple. Guards and sawboles stood behind the king in discipline. Kronze used a magical golden horn to make sure his words reached the people and back, before he started. Kronze made sure a prebuke stood near the podium with the scroll in question unsleeved. The king's speech as it is. Arma. My kin. I thank you of your patience. Of your trust in me still breathing. Know that I am saddened. By the many. Slain by the wings of flames. That the birds of Odine wish to lay waste to all. My guards men. My kin. My brothers. Neither one of you are expendable. There isn't an amount of glare rocks created. To replace the soul of one of you. My men. The days of Arma has taken in. The laughter of friendships. The advice from fathers. The empathy from mothers. Feast of family and sword of competitors. Now also. Tears of loved ones. Breaking of pride. Recollection of failure. Of being unable to protect. A tear falls from his eye. Kronze pauses mid-speech to see the face of his people, many hanged on to his every word. though he still questions his place as king. Kronze's love for everyone was the only he need no answers for. The Yele's are our friends. They played with your children, carried your work, bonded with you in your times of need. The Yele's don't know what to make of this as well. They might not be able to convey, but I assure you, they feel for those now gone. The king pauses once more at shouting from the crowd. They were meant to kill us. They were sent to kill us. Don't listen to this fool. This comes from an irate man in back. Kronze waits for the guards to remove him. The king continues. We will not treat our kin as our downfall. I will not have it. Do not let a dark day wipe clean how we got here. The Yele's help with the making of glare. And glare is debt to them respect and dignity. My law seals in punishment for the shaming of our friend. What they have no control of. The king pauses as the faces of the crowd looks puzzled. Kronze relaxes his face before speaking again. I know what angers you. I am scared too. But this will not bring them back. It will only push those who care away. To illustrate how much I feel for your sacrifice, my law will also allow for the destroying of black eggs by owner. You will not have to wait for my men. I only ask of you not to act upon this law in the face of your Yele. Do not turn into your own version of dragon. Those in the crowd that were against Kronze's laws rejoiced. At the new entry, the king continues. If Yeshia herself were here, I know she would have took my place and slain the dragons. At this moment, someone else shouts from the crowd. But she is. She walks with us. In you. She walks in you. They shout. The guards surround a young woman before Kronze tells them not. Let her speak, he says. There are tales of you taming and slaying. Yeshia knew she picked perfectly. She says. Kronze looks around before being encouraged to hand her the horn by others in the crowd. Once the young lady obtains the horn, she continues. Yeshia didn't pick a king, she wished for a ruler in God nature. Chatter happens amongst the crowd. Kronze tolerates this. He wishes to hear more. The king too wanted explanation of his abilities, though he never asked. Kronze wished someone did. The king was also insecure to inquire this of his people. Paraphir himself. He spoke of visions. A way to speak to Atar Rees. We are forever cursed in these lands. Atar Rees scripted for us a savior. A Demi-Spirit. You are the Demi-Spirit. The mortal god. The woman says this as Kronze signals for the horn. He grew tired of her words once hearing speaking beyond realms. Chatter continues in the crowd. Kronze silences it. I am not a god. I promise you. There were no deals in secret when I decided to wear the cloak. I am of the same flame abilities as the next. Train with me and you will achieve as well. As Kronze finishes his statement, the sounds of his voice continues, though his lips didn't.
She commands, she commands, she commands. She commands the crowd better than you. She wants for your crowd. There is no such thing as a Demi-Spirit. Lies.
The king takes out his blade to silence the crowd. The sound of the steel swiping out of the hoister quiets the crowd. As of this day, the black egg law is bled in, says Kronze, making a cut from his sword into his hand. The king hand imprints blood on the scroll to ratify the new law. After this he is handed a cloth by a prebuk to wrap his hand. At this moment Kronze hears the voice again. His own voice, but in deeper tone.
They want to see you lead. It says
to him. At this moment Kronze looks at his prebuk. He gets confirmation from his judge's body language that Kronze is the only to hear the voices. The king smiles and nods as to keep to him what he hears. Kronze bows as the crowd cheers. Guards began to surround the coffins to bring them back into the temple. 6 months later, Kronze decided to vacate the upper palace of the Taria building. The Black Egg Law was a complete success. There were no more sightings of dragons as the people were granted right under law to kill black eggs. Mistreatment of Yeleis was also punishable under law. With the days of Arma returning to peace, Kronze felt his presence of protection wasn't as much needed. The king didn't say why but wanted more peace and quit with his family. The height of praise for the king was better than expected. There were talks of building Kronze a temple but the king rejected it. By way of blaze and fog ships, Kronze had his men develop a stone island to the side of Bella River. The mini-island is where Kronze castle was built. At this moment, Kronze engineers were at peak in profession. Skilled warlocks and mathematician built his castle in the span of 4 months with help from Labors and Yeleis. Faya still wrote poems and stories for the schools to teach to the children of Arma. A particular favorite of her husband's was the story of the Warthog Man. The story was about accepting facial flaws. Kronze was inspired by the drawings of the creature's hands from the scroll. He wanted his Labors to construct 4 statues of the Warthog's hands to surround his home from a distance. In the nearby area, those who traveled would know they were near his castle by the discovery of the hands. A laborer pondered if the hands would scare people away, only to onlook an abnormal king to berate him of such thoughts. Kronze heard of a plant in a faraway forest called Guini plants. The plants appealed to him with their powers of warping one's thoughts by way of spell magic. Hours into the morning, the king of Arma watches in his garden as several flowers plant to mysterious plant. He stand with his wife at a balcony in back watching his son talk with a female visitor by the pond. Dayan speaks highly of her. Says Faya to Kronze. I've done my scroll keeping. She comes from a fine family. Says the king. Kata you did not. Replies Faya. If she is to be queen one day, I am invested to see what style she takes the halls in. Says Kronze leaning on the railing of the balcony. Why not consider your son this way? He would wear whatever I tell him. Even a ghoul suit. Says Faya smirking a bit. Kronze Horak. Dayan Horak. We are men of style. No matter the opinion of our queens. Says Kronze in a competitive tone. It is surely lost with you. You are flair in style because of your queen. She says before kissing him. Maybe so. Says the king after completing the kiss. Kronze looks back to the garden at his son. The shyness of Dayan's body language puts a smile on the king's face. The sun fresh in rays on the trees and stones at the garden. The sphere chimneys and royal roofs of the castle blocks most of the light, giving the garden a shade. Faya speaks after the pause in thought. Did you hear of Vojin? What happened to him after the voyage? Ask Faya. No. What is it? Ask Kronze curiously. He fell in illness. Bed-stricken. He's been this way for days now. Some of the guards' wives say he's been cursed. That it is this way as he is the one who took the Guineas from the forest. Says Faya. Kronze rolls his eyes slightly to the statement. Do not buy into their stories. Vojin can drink all in Arma under the tavern. If he wanted. His celebration of return beds him. Says Kronze. Faya looks with a worry but as she looks down at the gardens. Indeed I hope. I planned for favored. Not cursed flowers in our garden. She says watching a woman bury the purple mushroom in the ground. One of the helpers stand far in the back of the king and queen at the ceiling height double doors. My queen. There are more flowers at the bridge. Should I send them back? She asks. Faya places her hand on Kronze's shoulder before leaving. I must address this. Be fair to your daughter-in-law my dear. Says Faya before walking off. You have my word Kata. Says Kronze with his hands up. As Faya walks off several nobles walk by on the patio of carved rose imagery painted in white stone. The king can overhear the men in royal silk suits talking about the Guinea flowers. Well-groomed men in gold rings with lit pipes stroll by. There are a rare in plantation. Only one forest breeds them, says one of the nobles. Those trees aren't man-made, I've heard. God's made them, says another. The last one says, to deal in God plants, God woods. The king may have cursed us all. The first gent looks to defend the king. Do you hear yourself? Why would the divine go mad over a few plants? Our king wouldn't allow it, he says. Kronze's guilt triggered the familiar voices.
You killed your guard. Everyone is thinking it. Everyone knows you're in over your head. Don't ignore them. They won't ignore you. The guard will die. They blame you. Everyone knew that forest was cursed. The evidence is all in your yard. You are his killer. They will say, they will use this to take from you your name,
says the voices. The king glances at the lips in a sweat of anger. He hates them. They smoke on his leaves and walked his patio. Kronze designed the very ground they walked. For them to question his morals, who are they? They slain no dragon or save their land from starvation. My lord, settle this once and for all, says the noble in a jovial mood. The men never knew the king grew tense to their words.
Strike them now. They will not let you in the future. Kill them, kill them,
says the voices. Time slowed and the day turned to gloomy night in Kronze's mind. The noble breaks further from his group to walk towards his king. Kronze with his thumbs slow pulls back the strap to his sword. As the man got closer, the king pondered. He debated on the noble's heart or head to take. The cold steel begins to unpouch from the sword's cover near his waist. The sweat on Kronze's face reflects the son of Eliel. As the king target locks, the voices grow.
He deserves it. He will always deserve it,
says the voices. A spelled king is snapped out of trance by his name. Kata. Are you with me, love? I've been calling you. Asked the queen. Kronze's sword drops back in its sleeve as he shakes his head of thoughts. Yes, my love, says Kronze. The noble stops in front of him and waits politely. Would the pure whites take away from the Guineas if they were close to them? She asked from the double doors. Not at all, he says. Thank you, she says before returning inside. Kronze redirects himself to the noble standing in front. Will you do me a favor and correct Tordel of rumors about the purple curses? Ask of the noble. The king displays features of a nervous smile before looking to the men in back. No Sawboles has told me of such things. I can speak confidently of no curses, he says. The noble relaxes with the backing of his king. Kronze looks at the man as he turns to speak to his fold. The king looked intently at the man who never knew of how close to death, how close to Eternity Rock he came. Later on in the far end of the night, the king sat at a table with boxes of scrolls near a large window. There was no need for candles or lanterns this night. The full moon pierced through the trees, illuminating the king's quarters. In his sleep clothing, one piece, Kronze pores over the notes of a great sawbole. The one the Shais known as Paraphir. The sawbole walked with Yesha herself and spoke personally with her of many things. Kronze started to wonder if what the lady in the crowd said was true. The prophecy she spoke of, the Demi-Spirit. Was Kronze chosen? Is this the culprit behind the voices? Or something else? Drawings of trees and words of love scattered throughout the sawbole's notes. The king was getting frustrated. He tried not to. But the shuffle of scrolls grew louder. Before giving in to his frustration, the king stops at what he knew to be gold. A scroll older in look than the rest. A drawing of a man dancing in fire at the top of the scroll. Fi a nepthiu. It said. In spirit language this means mortal god. Also the words Muungai, which means the cursed. The scroll told of a conversation between Paraphir and Yeshia about a conversation she had with her father. A conversation about visions that worried the fire spirit. The conversation kept referring to the name Arma, meaning spelled flame. Kronze read of an anti, a power to balance the existence of power no other could consider. In their dreams, that antis live among all in the universe, balancing the nature of things untold by any. The goddess spoke of how her father hoped that an anti, a Fi a nepthi would save the people of Arma from the cursed visions. Kronze was not satisfied. This told him nothing of the voices. A small passage at the end told of the curse coming from a flame in the mountains. Nothing else. The king knew he would have to visit Paraphir's grave near the mountains, by way of shies for more answers. The cracking of the door alerts Kronze. It is his wife and daughter at the door. Father, says the little girl in front of her mother. Kronze turns. The voices try to talk but the king fights it. Yes, my love, he says. Are you as excited as I am? Is that why you can't sleep? Asked the little girl. Kronze looks confused. I wanted to wait until tomorrow to tell you, says Faya. Tell me what? Says Kronze, now standing from his chair. About the expo of the Rs. She says. The men of who speak of cloud temples. Ask Kronze. Though I wouldn't say it of that. Yes. They are inviting tribes of all kinds to see them, says the queen. The king kneels to his daughter and smiles. As evidence, my princess, I did not know. The little girl, bright in smile, ask. If so, what keeps you up? Kronze laughs a bit before saying. Laws and philosophies. Arma nonsense. He says. The king didn't want to lie to his child. The subject matter takes place in Arma. He tried to think of this and not the true nature of his inquiry. The guilt from earlier brought him to contemplate slaying a non-warrior. Now that you know, will you join us? Asked the queen. I'm not sure I will fit, says Kronze. Kata. There are no more dragons to be slain. Why not ease yourself to return to your land brand new? Suggests the queen. My love. Our Rs are not a breath of fresh air. I rather breathe in dragon. Besides, I do have things to tend to, says the king. We will be gone for an Re full week. Are you sure? Asked the queen. I am, says Kronze. Very well, handsome one, says Faya. I promise to be there to tuck Drya in. A few more minutes, says Kronze. The queen taps the little girl on her head to signal for them to leave. Before Faya could close the door, her husband says. One more thing. Faya, asked Kronze. Yes, Kata. She replies. Your voice. It is medicine to my worry heart, says Kronze. Faya moves hair from her face and smiles. My king. Your face is my blanket of warmth, she says back. Kronze bows before the door closes. Once the door shuts, the dread sinks in.
She won't say. She won't say. She can't say. She can't say. You,
says the voices. The king slightly shakes. What are you? Where is your origin? Says the king to himself.
I am you, says the
voices communicating back. Kronze looks around the room at maps and piles of robes on tables. I do not toy in vulgar cruelties. You're nothing of me, says Kronze.
You lie. You lie to us. I protected you from the dragon. The dragon. The dragon. The dragon.
Says the voices. I am an anti. That is what protects me. The greatest of all Yuins. Leave me now. Says Kronze, grabbing at his head.
We will stop the curse. We will stop the curse. We will stop the curse. We will protect Arma.
Says the voice before stopping. The king drops to his knee in fatigue. He looks at the moon through his window. Am I alone now? Asks Kronze to himself. The only thing he hears is breathing. A deep sigh comes from the king, knowing the voices are gone. The king walks to his desk and grabs the scroll of the man dancing in fire. After pocketing it, he cleans his desk of boxes and scrolls. 1 week later. Chapter 5. Arma changes forever. At the bay in Glare City, which lets out in Bellu River. The blaze sets up for departure. On the dock, saw bowls. Guards and the royal family talks with Kronze before leaving. All in royal red silk. The queen, princess, princes, and his new friend stands at the step ladder to the blaze. The morning was full of smiles and pleasant moods. Several guards stood by their yelees as the king talked to his family. I no longer want to go, says Drya. The princess outburst alerted Kronze, who was talking to the Massey of the ship. Kronze turns and kneels to Drya. The little girl hangs her head with her bottom lip large in disappointment. What's this, my princess? Ask the king. Drya holds back a tear when she says, You're not coming. I thought you wanted to. Faya walks up, overhearing the conversation. Drya. You been happy all week for this trip. What's wrong, baby? Asked the queen. The princess sways sideways before talking. Father. Father hates spending time with us, says the little girl, fighting a tear. Drya, no, my love, says Kronze. The king hugs his daughter as others look on. The king brushed a tear from his daughter's cheek. This is only a hiccup in time. I am only dealing in matters I have to. I would never want to be away from you, Drya, says Kronze. Drya looks away after hearing her father. She cared not for policies or anything pertaining to king matters. She only wanted to be with her father. Feeling the conversation was going nowhere, Faya steps in. We can see the world dial. Once we return, we can see the statue with father, says Faya to Drya. Faya looks to Kronze for agreement while his daughter looks his way as well. Of course. Of course. We can look together. I will be done with my affairs by then. The stories of its glory. We can investigate together, says Kronze, smiling at his daughter. Drya smiles before the tears could dry in her face. Promise? She asks. The king tickles her while kissing her cheek. You know I never break a promise, he says while making his daughter laugh. 1 week, says Drya before running on board. As Kronze stands up, Faya points her finger at him. You are in debt to me no matter what your laws say, says the queen. As you are the ruler to my castle, my laws do not apply there, says Kronze before kissing his wife. The king worried slightly in the back of his head. He had his men search for the woman from the funeral to obtain more information. As expected, the woman was a shy. She was well versed in her temple's philosophies. Stories of Periphere's disappearance in the mountains were well known. The king promised most access to temples of old records if the woman found the location of the Sawbol's tomb. Kronze did not know if the girl would return in a week. These thoughts strained Kronze's smile. I do have something to share with you, says Faya in a vulnerable stare. What's the matter? Asks Kronze. A Sawbol has returned from Vojan's home. He said there's nothing he could do. No medicine would stop his illness, says Faya. Once more the voices returns as Kronze stands in stop from his guilt.
She's calling you a liar. She thinks of you a murderer. Murderer, murderer.
Kronze.
Go away.
Kronze.
Go.
Kronze.
Leave us.
Kronze, the king comes back to reality at the sound of his wife's voice. Are you okay, my dear? You look afraid. She asks. I am fine, Faya. Nothing a feast won't cure, he says. Be sure to see a saw bowl. I wouldn't want what else Vojan to come for you, says Faya to Kronze before hugging him. Dayan walks up to introduce Kronze to the girl from the garden. The boy, now a teenager, walks up to his father somewhat shy. Father, I like for you to met someone, says Dayan. Es Quinn. I know of your father's silks, says Kronze as he kisses the girl's hand. Dayan looks slightly confused. You've already met? Asked the prince. No, but I do my best to know who walks my yards before they do, says the king. As the girl speaks, Kronze ponders his wife's voice. While he didn't want to be rude, he couldn't help but to notice. The voices in his head feared hers. His words had no effect on them. Faye's words made the ones within him cowered at her sound. Are the two related? Is the Queen of Arma somehow involved? Is she too a Demi-Spirit? Kronze began to wonder if allowing his wife to leave him at his time of most need was unworthy of a king in judgment. Before he could add more thoughts, he heard his name again. Dad, says Dayan. Yes, my son, replies Kronze. Es Quinn asked you something, says Dayan, leaning towards his father. Kronze looks to the young lady as he realizes where he is. Is it true you can withstand dragon fire? She asks. Stories of heroism can be exaggerated to give hope, but they will always remain just stories, says the king. Before Es Quinn could reply, the Massey informs everyone that the blaze is to leave soon. Kronze hugs Dayan before leaving. Your mother and sister are yours to worry about for me. Do me proud, says the king mid-hug with his prince. I shall, father, says Dayan in response. Kronze walks back to his very own Yelane away from the river. The trip was weighing in on everyone as to the fact very few has ever left the lands of Arma. Men board both fog ships in front and back the blaze ship before it takes off. 4 days later. It is midday and the skies of Arma are calm. Birds are full of cheer and animals nearby carry on about their day. Kronze stands in front of his castle watching the gardens tend to his bushes. The king felt a bush sat too high in the soil that the others. Kronze requested a more experienced garden correct the mistake. Though there wasn't much for a king of a quiet time to do. Kronze spent most of his day approving market treaties and recognizing marriage scrolls. A breath of air from outside his castle was what the king felt he needed when he noticed the bushes. The protector of Arma was never without the presence of his guards. Cloak swordsmen with ideas of warrior hunters and gods as role models. As Kronze watches the garden resurface the dirt, a Yele in the distance strolls across the stone bridge that connects the castle to land. A man in a black vest and skin pouch sits on top the lizard. As he makes his way towards the barrier wall, he is stopped by the hands of 2 guards who questions his quest. Kronze stares on to this. You are entering Arma's castle. State your mission, says one of the guards. As the man reaches in his vest, both guards at the wall entrance reach for their swords. This stops the man in his tracks. At ease. I am only a land bird. In message, says the man before pulling out a scroll. One of the 2 guards, still with his hand at his sword, slowly walks up to the Yele. He never takes his eyes off the man atop. For the king's eyes only, says the man hanging over the scroll to the guard. The guard grips and feels the scroll, checking for anything sharp or made to explode. The guard nods without speaking after the scroll passes his test. The man pulls at the robe in his lizard's mouth before turning it around. As the lizard jets away on the stone bridge, the guard stares at the scroll before speaking briefly with another. A relay race of hanging scroll from guard to another takes place. A guard closer to Kronze walks up to him. From Tare. Findings of the Rimner. Says the guard, handing off the scroll. The king almost forgotten about the ship. The sequence of events that took place that night took the king's mind off the ship. Once they returned to the city, thoughts of investigation into the crew of the ship stayed with Kronze mentally for seconds. The ship went to military barracks where engineers and sabols worked on the ship. The king wanted to know if his seas were cursed and what from. If not the work of his dragons, what wrecked the ship? The king unrolls the scroll to the emblem of the fire tear at the top of the page. The scroll ruled out dragons as to blame for the wreckage. There were no mentions of the crew other than the name Rimner being of origin in the land of Ishban. The larger script spoke of tailed worms larger than ships with dragon faces. A common sighting over 1,000 years ago by others. Drawings and depictions in night stories by fishermen of old. Some spoke of the eyes of these creatures. The green in their eyes. This made Kronze instantly think of the ocean, the singing of the ocean the night of the dragon. Parts of the ocean flared green. The king wondered if what took Rimner watched as he fought the dragon. The script ended with residue spreaded at the bottom of the scroll. Sabols spoke of the residue being tracked to fins found at the bottom of the ocean near Yemi Mountains. Mountains in the ocean that connected giant land masses. The fins were talked about for ages. The only of its kind. The fins were half the size of sails. There were no fish found to produce this scale in size. The residue is said to be found on the outside of the ship. The findings at the end says that the crew were most likely last to see where the residue came from. No fishermen have spoken of anything as big as the fins found by the Yemi Mountains. Kronze wished to know more. The king figured to investigate more once he dealt Perifir's tomb and the world dial. The king rolls up the scroll while looking at his gardener. A water bearer walks out of the front double doors to the castle at this moment. My king. Your poetry reading is ready. She says. Kronze knew a scripture of his wife's poetry would be read by a Nagu. I'll be there soon. Says the king to the young woman. Kronze kneels once more to instruct the gardener on the ideas in his head about the soil. Kronze looks up to see his castle. His garden. Both were very active. The king noted in his mind that he wanted the castle built to get away from Arma. To clear his mind now his days are clear of dragons. Yet the castle ran fluidly with the people of the spell flame. After acknowledging the guards and gardeners, Kronze returns to inside his castle for a reading. In the guest quarters of the living room floor, Kronze sits in his chair as his Nagu ready his scrolls. An elderly man in grey robe and a long goatee. The choice of color robe told Kronze which god the old man worship. Worshippers of Yeshua wore red robes while Odine worshippers, Dine O'Deers, wore grey. The man stood out in the king's castle. The room was red and gold with bits of white where it made easy on the eyes. As Kronze sat across from the Nagu, the king analyzed the elder man's belongings. His scrolls were thicker than the Armenites has ever seen. The latches on his pouches were loose with stress. The king figured it was from the thick scrolls he carried. The elder man pulls out a scroll in satisfaction. There you are, he says. Kronze requested scrolls that deal with illness in the mind. Anything to help him deal with what went on in his head. The fruit trees that vanished, says the Nagu reading the title of the poem. As Kronze sat and listened, his mind tried to derail the king of the words from the poem. He remembered a poem or two that started the same as this one. A tree that bears something important to the character teaches them a lesson. The king started to become bored with the language. He didn't want to come off rude, so he stared. But the king's mind didn't stay for the story. The elder found himself stuck on a particular word in the story. After several attempts at pronouncing the word, Kronze was alerted to the man's struggle. The king stands up and looks over the scroll. This is visceral, say the king to the Nagu. Thank you. My eye sure is poor, says the Nagu in laughter. Age will come for us all, says the king sitting back down. The elderly man looks Kronze way before deciding to compliment him. You're a natural. Maybe you should write poetry, says the Nagu. I rather someone else read. But I appreciate the remarks, says Kronze. Once the man went back to reading, the king started to notice. The sun no longer pierces through the windows, the day didn't turn to night. More so, the day seemed as if a rain cloud governed its color. As Kronze felt his chest thicken, the voices returned to him.
He knows. He knows. He knows. He knows you're not listening. You're not worth the likes to teach words to. He thinks. He thinks. He thinks. He thinks. Kronze
Looked around, trying to silence the voice in his head. The king pleaded in facial expression to a painting of his wife over the fireplace. Nothing saved him from the thoughts. The wind picked up, flapping at drapes and orderly items not made of large mass. At this very moment the king see the Nagu turn and smile, with every wrinkle in his face following his grin. The Nagu's eyes blackened with rage and his voice joyful in torture.
What do you know of poems? Don't try and roleplay me with your silence. You couldn't cipher words if you wanted,
says the Nagu, throwing the scroll behind him. As the king backs up to the wool bedding, the Nagu's face changes from horseplay and smile to concerned. Are you okay? Asked the Nagu in a vulnerable face. What? What? Heavy breathing, what do you mean? Ask a now scared Kronze. The Nagu resumes his face.
Are you sick? Are you just my lord?
Says a Nagu laughing. The king pulls poor his sword before threatening the man. Stay back, you hear, tells the king. The Nagu stays and walks slowly with both hands out, smirking.
Or what? You will fail me like you did your guard. Laughs, you wish to lie to me as you did to your daughter. Don't bore. Impress me. Laughter. Coming
from the Nagu. A flare in the eyes of the once nervous Kronze shows. As he calms himself to stand, the Nagu's face returns to vulnerable. Panic blankets his face. My king. Please. My king. Guards. Screams the man. With no hesitation the king removes the man's head as soon as he removes the blade from his waist. Second later a guardsman appears from the hallway. You call my lord, says the guard. Before he could see what his king has done, Kronze throws his sword, piercing the man's clothing. A gut noise is made as the man is nailed to the wall. The blood of the guard was hard to determine from the red of his suit. Across the planet in the city of Ouz, Queen Faya stands near one of the many waterfalls in the Ari city. The white stone buildings and white-robed men and women filled the queen's vision. Clear waters and sparkles of glitter at the edge of buildings fascinates all. The queen is mid-conversation with an Ari before her chest starts to hurt. The queen drops to one leg. Madam, are you in need? What is it? Asked the Ari. Clin. That I don't. I can't. My husband. She says as she tries to breathe. The Ari redirects his Lelas from watching three men in green cloaks walk into the ocean. The queen needs off her feet, he says as he hands signals. No. Says Faya with her hand raised. The Ari turns back. What is it? Faya looks to the Ari and says. My husband. He needs me. I can feel him. The queen fights tears. I must return to my land. I'm sorry, she says. After the queen finishes, her guards walks up to retrieve her. The Ari in white robe and clear jewelry folds his arms as he watches in discipline. I am truly sorry, tiebreaker, says the queen before disappearing out of the Ari's sight. Back in Arma, the stiff king walks through the flames of his double doors. Smoke leaves each window of his castle. Gardeners hide and guards lay in the halls. Blood stains the walls and pleas of those in sight fight with the crinkling of the flames for dominance in sound. The voices are at play in Kronze's head.
She was the first to laugh at you,
says the voice. A woman sees Kronze walking slowly down the steps of the castle. A constant mug on his face. Eyes blood red. She breaks from her fellow gardeners in the bushes. They try to hold her back by the end of her dress, but her panic wins the tug match. The woman runs from the bushes out towards the wall. With a clear view, Kronze is alerted to her screams. The woman preaches her salvation as she flees. Yeshia, my mother. Yeshia, my sister. Please take me with you, she cries. Kronze points the woman's way. The flames from the top floor descends onto her like a vine. Her skin oils before it melts. The pain is instant, which cuts her screams mid-chant. The reveal of burn organ and skeleton as she drops almost gives way to a scream from the others in the bush. But they dare not. Any guard that stood in Kronze's way charred in their suits. I can
change. I can change. We can change. There is no curse,
says the voices. The king's Yale walks up from the stone bridge expecting the king to ride him. The Yale looks unaware to the burning castle in the back. Not a recollection to the bodies scattered in the courtyard. An eager lizard awaits the king to board it.
They brought dragons to your land. They tried to fool you,
says the voices. Kronze takes out his sword. The king mounts the lizard. Instead of signaling with the straps for the lizard to move, the king positions his blade in a stabbing motion. Once the creature was slayed, the Fire King parts from the bridge.
Now let's deal with Tare,
says the voices. A day later. The charred remains of guards as they stood over the innocent peppers the city. The king single-handedly achieved more in destruction and mayhem than the dragons before him. Those who ran from Kronze were stabbed or filleted. Those that looked into his eyes were made to do unspeakable things to themselves. Several loved ones looked on as they tried to stop them. Mothers were buried alive for attempting to stop fathers from jumping to their end. Guards were impaled for leading the innocent to safety. The blade of molten lava cut through any barrier the people sat between him and them. The more the buildings burned, the more fuel Kronze has at his command. His generals tried to reason with him. The bags under his eyes of hate didn't budge. The most skilled of his men were sent to Eternity Rock. In Kronze's view, all laughed and mocked him before death. A game of "You can't catch me" played in his head as the innocent ran from him. In his mind, none were innocent. The voices told him all that were innocent left. Only the damned. The corrupt. Those that wish him dead stayed back. As Kronze approaches the court building, 100 guards crouch in the courtyard. All with their shields of rose gold facing their king. The men never thought they would have to protect their land from their king. Laocoon walks out of the shields in bravery. My king. Kin. Do not do this. Your anger with the winged ones. It rules over you, he says as he cries. Kronze stops. He glances at all in the court. Hair undone and shirt ripped. The king looks into the Dino Deer's eyes.
He thinks. You are full of error. Not of wisdom. Kill him. Kill him now,
says the voices. What is it? Do the anger speaks to you now? Help me saw. Before the saw bowl could finish, Kronze points his hand his way, heating his lungs to burn. The priest's chest reds as smoke leaves his lungs. He drops. Kronze produces a large wind. The wind pulls at the men in the courtyard. A flame cast inside the wind, a tornado wind of flame reaches the men before they could fall back. The shields red and spell to protect them. The brightest of their shields continues. So much so that the light from the shields blocks out the sight of Kronze. The brightest surpasses its peak. The bright begins to heat the hands of those holding the shields. As they drop their shields, the guards suffer the fate of Laocoon as well. In minutes 100 men falls with smoke in their lungs. The king steps over guard after guard, eyes still with open mouths. Once he makes it to his court building, the double of stone melts like steel to butter. After several minutes inside, cries from men and women are heard from both ends of the city. The next morning, small mushroom clouds appeared over the city as the blaze ship docks. The magic of the royal ship was exhausted from its speed and travels. Both fog ships docked first with guards banding together to surround the queen. Flames spread from building to building. Tales of panic ripple through the streets with man-made barricades. A struggle with a general took place before Faya was allowed to leave the ship. As she boards the net, Drea runs up holding at the queen's leg. "Don't go. You don't have to. They'll find him," says Drea to her mother. Faya looks back at her son. "Dayan, please," she says, looking for assistance. A look of fear and repression of tears fills the prince's face. Fia. Maybe she's right. Let the guards find him. "Please," says Dayan. The queen climbs her foot back in the ship. "I have to find your father. He is in severe pain. He needs me," says Faya. The tears break in her son's face as he speaks. "We need you. Drea is not the only one scared," says the prince. The queen walks to a frantic son, a tearful daughter behind her. She looks to control the emotions of her children. She flattens her hand, moving it up and down to resemble a calm of emotion in expression. "Son, we have to find him," says Faya. "He fights dragons. He knows how to keep safe." "Don't go," says Dayan. Quinn takes his hand from behind. "Your father needs your mother. I believe her. I see it in her. She will be back," says Quinn. Dayan quits a bit. Faya looks to thank Quinn before leaving. "Don't go. Don't go, mother," pleads Drea. As Faya descends from the net, she overhears a guard saying, "Those wounds don't look to come from a dragon." She stops mid-net, fighting her own tears. She felt she knew the true nature of the chaos. She didn't want to feel it to being. The heartbreak was too much already. After minutes of walking through the city, several men removed stone and wood from the queen's path. They did their best to shield her from the sight of dead people, but there were too many. As they clear an alley, the men sees Kronze sitting on a gutter ledge at the end of it. The men knew not to approach. There was smoke coming from the king's eyes. The queen thought to speak until muffled by a guard from behind. "Shish," he says before pointing. The shade of the building hid at first. A closer look showed the king's arm in blood, with his sword rough in edge from use. The Queen of Arma tears up while shaking her head. She couldn't believe. Her intuition was right, there was no dragon this time. All she passed into the city. All that were dead. This was at the hands of her husband. Something was wrong with him. She never saw it. He was happy once she left. Was this the work of the dragons? He never spoke of it. The queen felt he was too brave to say. She wanted to give him space. That her king would come to her when the time was right. A guard looks to move in closer but clips his sword on the wall from its holster at his waist. The screech of the metal on stone stops the king mid-head shake. In the shadow of the alley, Kronze drops his arms from his head and stands. His eyes can be seen from afar, the red of them pierce through shadow. He eyes the men in the back of the alley. The guard would give away their position, stand in front with his blade. "No!" yells one guard from afar. They knew they couldn't take him on one by one. Faya looks to see the guard exit his battle stance. She was confused as to a tensed cloak guard in front of her, who stares down her husband, now relaxed in nature. The guard turns in a sweat, face shaken as if to fight his thoughts. "Stop me. I don't want to do it," he cries. Before they could understand, The guard stabs his own stomach with his sword. As the queen's eyes enlarged, a general in the ground yells back to the blaze ship. A rose cannon is fired towards the roof of the building the king stands on. He walks slowly in a rage with no attempt to dodge the cherry flames. One by one they drop before touching him. Faya bites the hand of the guard and runs out of the group of guards. The general reaches for her, but she's ran too far. Kronze. Kata. Do you hear me? Yells a queen in full tears. The flames flicker in his eyes. The king starts to shake his head on the roof again.
She can't. She can't. She can't. Do not let her silence us,
says the voices. Kronze barely hold his balance on the roof. My husband. Please come down, please. Tears start to form around the eyes of the anger king. He holds his hand to his ear. The voices intend to keep me company, says the king. Kata. My blanket of warmth, says the queen, tasting her own tears as they drop in her mouth. Listen to my voice. Let my voice keep you. You don't have to walk alone in your mind. My husband. Drya wishes for you not. Dayan as well, she says. Back at the dock, the guards on the blaze redirects the rose cannon. The Massey stops them. That is your king and queen. Are you mad? Both guards stop in shame. Where are the children? Asked the Massey, looking around the ship. In town. Kronze squeezes at his head.
She's not. She's not. She's not.
I am Kata, my husband. The mixture of voices from both wife and inwardly causes Kronze to let out a scream while he engulfs himself in red flames on the roof. As he stops, he looks around, dizzy from the scream. In the far, the building near to the port reveals people. The king can see his son and daughter. His tears dry. The wind makes him feel like he's back at his castle. He looks to his wife, whose arms stretch for him. The red in his eyes are gone. He turns to see bodies in the streets. Fire from buildings nearby. His guards at battle stance in his direction. The sword in his hand stained in blood. He softly speaks to himself. I am the dragon. He bleeds out a tear of blood from his eye as he sees his daughter in the window. Before inhaling, Kronze calls for his wife. Faya. He says. Yes, my husband. My king. Says Faya with both hands together, looking up. As another tear in blood falls from his eye, he says. Your voice. It is medicine to my weary heart. The king pierces his heart with the blade before dropping off the roof. Faya screams loud, shaking the craniums of the guards nearby. Drya and Dayan screams in tears from the window. Kronze falls to the ground, dropping his sword, which no longer glows red. The queen runs to him. She grabs his body and lays it in her lap. Come on, love. Stay with me. Listen to my voice. She says, trying to calm herself. I am with you. The voices have finally quiet. Says the king before his eyes stilled. Kata. Talk to me. Kronze, says the queen. The sounds of the city quiets and blurred to her voice in pain. The queen weeps for her stained king. The dragon slayer, the king of Arma, is no more. The end of the first Demi-Spirit.